What is up, everybody? Welcome to Crunch Time. This is the show, as you well know by now, sponsored by Fanduel. We take you up all the way into lock with two of the sharpest minds in the biz. It's a weird one. If you hear that intro music, it generally means there's no Grinders live. It means it's a small slate. It's just two games. I threw in some lineups. I feel like everybody might be kind of landing in the same spot, so I'm interested to hear, how we get different in tournaments. I saw in the YouTube chat people talking about, do we fade Giannis? So I'm sure there's a lot of strategy, and we will dive into all that. But first, let us say hello to the one, the only TJ Zwarich in the house. What up, man?
Doing well. I even though it's a pretty terrible football game tonight, we only got 2 games of NBA. It's a big day for me as a Marvel fan because we got the Loki finale tonight on Disney Plus, and then I'm going to the theater to go see the Marvels. So I'm excited. It's going to be a fun night. Full disclosure, I'm not playing any FanDuel and DraftKings tonight, but I still have fully reviewed the slate, wrote up a bunch of Prize Picks articles for the NBA slate and the NFL slate, and so I'm still ready to dive in.
Okay, very good. And then we got my guy Kyle Murray in the house as well. Kyle, what's up, man?
Yeah, doing good. Looking forward to this, this slate, 2 games, and then obviously a nice little single game slate later in the NFL, which, 2 teams that we're not, overly pumped about, but still it's sports and we get to, gamble a little bit and have some fun. So I'm looking forward to it.
That was the kindest way of saying these slates suck that I've ever heard. It's a nice little 2-gamer, a nice little, well, look, people want to make money. And one thing I learned last night, I thought my lineup sucked last night. I had so many snowflakes. I had chalky dudes who busted. And yet it was my second most profitable night of NBA yet, because I guess everybody played sucky, guys. I guess there were a lot of landmines out there last night. And that just kind of, we're all in the same boat on these shitty slates like tonight. We're all in the same spot. So somebody's got to win it. And hopefully that someone will be somebody in the chat or right here on this panel. Let's dive into it, if you don't mind. TJ, I think you can kind of take the lead, give us an overarching thoughts, and then go into maybe a little FanDuel cash build.
Yeah, so despite this only being 2 games, it actually wasn't uneventful. It was quite a bit going on because we had Giannis Antetokounmpo as probable, then to game time decision, and then now he's playing. But
I missed all Lillard, of that.
So, Damian Lillard, I'm just trying to be suspenseful with it. It's only 2 games. Ooh. But Damian Lillard was downgraded to questionable halfway through the day on the injury report, and then they listed him as a game time decision, and he is out. There's no Damian Lillard tonight. And so that makes me feel really good because I wrote up for my NBA Prize Picks article, I wrote up Giannis's over for fantasy points today. So the fact that he's playing and Damian Lillard is not, sometimes you get lucky with those middle of the day news because I got to get the article out first. And that was one of the times that I got lucky. And so feeling pretty good about that. 2-game slate. That game is first, and it's with Indiana, 2 teams who have played almost no defense this year. Indiana plays at one of the fastest paces in the league. And this is a 1-point spread with a huge total. So an actually very interesting DFS game today. I plugged in Noto's 2 core plays of Cameron Payne and Tyrese Halliburton, added in 3 of my own of Benedict Mathurin, Giannis Antetokounmpo, and Goga Bitadze. All of them are in that first game except for 1. But it gives you 1 person at each position. And so all you got to do is fill in the rest of them with 6,400 remaining for cash games. So at the point guard position, we will start there. You're either going with, in my opinion, Trae Young or Markelle Fultz. Trae Young is nice and underpriced, $9K. He's probably my preference here. But Fultz, despite being questionable, is still a totally reasonable option here because he's 5,700. And as long as you leave $100 remaining, you can pivot up to Jalen Suggs. You want to leave $600 remaining, you can pivot up to Cole Anthony. Or you didn't leave any salary, but you still got a couple players you want to upgrade elsewhere, you can go down to Anthony Black, who is going to start in his place. So it's either Trae Young or Markelle Fultz, and then you pivot to one of the other point guards if he doesn't happen to play. Shooting guard position, Cameron Payne. This is where I got him in here. You can totally play DeJounte Murray at the other spot. That's fine. Franz Wagner, you can go to at the shooting guard position or small forward. Either one, he works there. And then Buddy Hield, I think, is probably more of a tournament play, but because of how cheap he is, I think he's totally reasonable in cash games as well, even though he doesn't play a bunch of minutes. Small forward, if you're not playing Wagner here, you can play Jalen Johnson. You can play Paolo Banchero. Love both of these guys today. I'd probably want to play both Banchero and Johnson, which would lead me to a kind of this situation here. One in the small forward, one in the power forward. But if you're saving some salary, you want to get all the way up to Trae Young, then you probably want to stay low with Jalen Johnson and avoid somebody like Banchero. You're probably choosing between Banchero and Trae Young at the in cash games today. On that note, disclaimer, maybe not the best day to play cash games because it's only in 2-game slate. But at the same time, this lineup does kind of build itself a little bit. So while you may be duped with 18 of the other people in your cash game, it's probably not the hardest day to actually double up. Power forward position, I want to play Giannis. I want to play Jalen Johnson as probably my 2 favorite guys, and then you can play Paolo Banchero here as well. But this is really a Banchero or Jalen Johnson spot beside Giannis. I don't want to go anywhere else for cash games. And then at the center position, sorry, my wife just got home. Center position, it's Batatse and cash. Anybody else is just a tournament option.
Okay, very good. Let's kick this over to tournaments here. And I guess if you don't mind me starting with just a general question, if you play Giannis, do you have to play Halliburton? And if you're just playing one of the two, are you dumb? Is that because that's just occurring to me? Like either it seems they're both going to go off or the game's going to be a blowout and they're both going to suck. Is that fair or no?
I mean, I think from a tournament perspective on a 2-game slate, I obviously want to give good advice, but on a 2-game slate you can really do whatever. So I don't think anything is dumb by any means, because if you're just looking to be contrarian, that's really the only excuse that you need to do something. But in a game where this game does stay close, it is obviously a pretty massive total, 242.5. And obviously the spread is fairly close and getting closer with Lillard being ruled out. I do think these two correlate pretty well, so it does make sense to have them in lineups together. And on Fanduel specifically, you think of $10K for Halliburton, not a cheap price tag by any means, but Giannis last year was 11.5, $12K type player. Obviously Dame being there is lowered his price tag a bit, so you're getting a pretty nice discount on Giannis as well. So I do think that both of these guys do correlate very well, but if you wanted to take a stand and say, maybe I'll try to be different, because obviously Giannis is going to be very, very popular and obviously he's a really good play. But if your stance was to get different by, not playing Halliburton, that's totally fine, because it's a 2-game slate and you can do that to be a little bit unique. But there are also other guys that you could, do that as well. Like, Campaign, I do think he's the best value play by far. I think he is, easily the cash game salary saver, but he's going to be very popular as well. So he kind of works the same way as Halliburton, to where if Giannis, if he's going to be in your lineup and he's peaking up near 70-75% owned in some of these contests, Campaign's also going to be very popular. So it's more so just the idea of saying, okay, there's going to be a handful of very popular guys in this Milwaukee Indy game. Who can I maybe leave out of my lineup in order to be a little bit contrarian? And Halliburton is definitely one of those guys, just because he is expensive. If he has a lackluster game, he does need to probably put up 45, 50 points for you to feel like you are, that's a successful play. And then you also consider you do have Trae Young as a pivot. So I think there's definitely ways that you can go without playing Giannis and Halliburton together.
Okay.
And I think one of the ways that you can do it too is on a 2-game slate, it's almost impossible to get different. And so say you want to play Giannis, but not Halliburton. So maybe what you're thinking happens then is you're playing the Bucks to blow out the Pacers, and Giannis is still going to get there in 3 quarters because they put up a bunch of points, and you want those raw points. That's how you're playing it. So then maybe you play, and this is strictly large field stuff and probably either low dollar or if you have a lot of dollars to spend, but maybe you pair him with TJ McConnell instead of Cameron Payne or Tyrese Halliburton. He's projected for 7 minutes. If this game stays close, he's not going to play almost at all. But if it happens to be a blowout and he plays the entire 4th quarter, Halliburton doesn't get there because he only played 3 quarters. Cameron Payne doesn't end up closing. And all of a sudden you have TJ McConnell, who outscored Payne and from a point per dollar standpoint, outscored Halliburton, and you win a tournament. And so that's a way you can just you don't always have to play projections on a 2-game slate. You can play game script almost like an NFL showdown scenario. You can say, this doesn't project well, but if the game goes this way, this will happen, and try that kind of thing.
Right. Okay. Very interesting. All right. Kyle, do you mind kind of walking me through some of your favorite tournament plays, maybe? I assume it's a lot of the same names that we heard from TJ since it's a 2-game slate.
Yeah, definitely going to be, like TJ said, difficult to get different. And, in NBA, you don't want to stray too far off, the path, right? Because a lot of these plays are projecting well for a reason. We've heard it a million times that NBA is the easiest sport to project. And, these are, typically good chalk and all that stuff. But for a couple of tournament plays that I do like, most of the tournament plays that will be lower owned are going to be in the Atlanta and Orlando game. I just think naturally people are going to gravitate to Milwaukee and the Pacers game just because of the fact that Dame out, a couple of strong value options on the Pacers side as well, and then the higher total. But that second game, it's no slouch either, 232 total for that game. So I think both these games are good game environments. So with that being said, these Orlando guards, Cole Anthony, Jalen Suggs, both these guys are important to monitor. If Fultz is ruled out, you could potentially be in a spot where people they have their lineup spots sort of locked, right? Obviously, I think Trae Young might be a popular guy at point guard. Halliburton will be an option at point guard. But there are ways, maybe people will make and again, I would recommend putting Campaign in that shooting guard spot, like TJ mentioned, and sort of, utilizing it that way, just because if Fultz is ruled out, you give yourself a little bit more flexibility there. And both Anthony and Suggs would get a nice boost there. In terms of the forwards over here, lower owned guys, Chris Middleton is a low owned guy. We're not projecting him for a ton of minutes, but we have seen him be quite efficient over the course of his career, and we have seen him be efficient with Lillard off the floor this season in a very, very small sample size. I wouldn't go too overboard with that. Probably not expecting any more than maybe 24 minutes at the most for him here. They're easing him back, being very cautious with him, but this is a guy that can post a 1.5 fantasy point per minute performance, and everyone's going to be scared by those numbers, those minutes numbers, and I think rightfully so. I don't think he's an optimal play by any means, but if he does have one of those highly efficient games, and again, with Dame out and with a good matchup, this could be a perfect sort of spot for him to have that. I do think he's a pretty interesting contrarian play there. A couple other names that stick out. Franz Wagner is one. 7.4. I think he's sort of in a price tag where maybe not a ton of people will get to him. And I do think on FanDuel, small forward, there's going to be a lot of people spending down there. So I think Wagner is pretty interesting there. I think we're showing him at 37% projected ownership. I wouldn't be surprised if that even comes a little bit lower there, just because of the fact that with people spending down at small forward. So and then in terms of some other names that stick out at the forward position, I think those are the main two names that I really wanted to touch on. Sure. Jalen Johnson's up there in price a little bit at 6.3. He has had some highly efficient rebounding nights. Bobby Portis is always a guy who on these smaller slates makes sense because he's another one of those guys that can pop for those highly efficient fantasy point per minute nights. And then the last name I mentioned, which will kind of segue into the center position as well, because he's also power forward eligible, Mo Wagner here. We haven't projected for 23 minutes. I think it's, fairly likely that him and Goga sort of split the minutes down the middle. And a lot of people are going to be playing Goga at the center position. And I think Mo Wagner is pretty interesting here. I think I was looking at DraftKings where he has power forward and center eligibility. But, regardless, the point still sort of remains there with him being a good potential pivot off of Goga there. I think he'll be a fraction of the ownership. He's equally as good of a permanent producer, and it's a little bit more expensive. So I do think the field's going to side with Goga. So while I do think Goga is probably the favorite to get a slight edge in minutes, I don't think it's anything that is worth a whole lot, in terms of taking it to the bank there. I think they'll be within 2 or 3 minutes of each other. And, it just takes a little bit of foul trouble or a little bit of, stock luck here for Wagner to surpass Goga in terms of the per minute production there. So I really like Mo Wagner as a tournament pivot tonight.
Very nice.
I love that call so much. Before we transition to DraftKings, especially on FanDuel here, he's $400 more. I'm assuming he's going to come in more than 1.7% owned, but look at that ownership difference. 36.74 compared to 1.7 in their first game. They've been this has been 2 games so far. In their first game, Wagner got into foul trouble, and Goga played a great game. He got 40 fantasy points in 25 minutes. Their next game, he only played 21 minutes against Dallas, and Mo Wagner He played 26 and had more fantasy points. So he actually got the better side of the minutes because he was playing better last game, like he said. And on FanDuel, because he only has that center eligibility, nobody's playing him. So you could almost just play like a cash style project super well lineup today. And your only spot you get different is just Mo Wagner instead of Goga. And that can be as different as you need in tournaments today. Like if you're playing a single entry, that can be your one way of getting different.
Yeah. Okay. Very, very good stuff, guys. Of course, that was FanDuel. We do want to kick it to DK, but we should mention this show is sponsored by FanDuel. Bet $5 on any money line, get $150 in bonus bets if your bet wins, and all customers get a profit boost every day. For new users in Arizona, Colorado, Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Kansas, Louisiana, Maryland, Massachusetts, Michigan, New Jersey, New York, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Virginia, West Virginia, Wyoming. Terms and conditions apply. Must be 21 up. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Shout out to our sponsor, FanDuel. Hit us with a little thumbs up. Keeping this show free. FanDuel helping to keep this show free. So give them the thumbs up if you don't mind. We got some questions coming in the chat. We will get to those. But I do want to ask, TJ, is there a different build for DK? We mentioned some positional differences, but is there pricing differences, or is it the same names and the same thoughts in general?
Bit of both. So up top, same thing. Tyrese Halliburton, Giannis Antetokounmpo. We got them both plugged in here. And then Cameron Payne as well, who's even cheaper. And so he's going to be more highly owned, but is going to be even better of a point per dollar play as well at $3,700 on DraftKings. Onyeka Okongwu, nice and cheap on DraftKings. So I tagged him in here at the center position as well. He's going to be nearly 50% owned. He's nice and cheap. Great value to play today. Maybe in tournaments you want to pivot somebody like Clint Capella, but in cash games today at $4,200 Okongwu, I think that's where we want to go. We already got 2 point guards plugged in, so at the shooting guard position, you can go up to somebody like DeJounte Murray, but I think we're probably I would rather go all the way down to Bogdan Bogdanovic at 4-4, nice and cheap here, or Benedict Mathurin. Maybe you want to play both of them, and so if that's the case, you can go Mathurin in the shooting guard and Bogdanovic at the small forward. They're both two nice salary saving options today. Totally okay with that. The one thing I would mention, though, is I probably would rather have Jalen Suggs over Benedict Mathurin here at the shooting guard position if Cole Anthony were to not play. If Markelle Fultz were to not play. And so Anthony Black also has that shooting guard small forward eligibility. And so that's one of the reasons I also really like, say, Bogdan Bogdanovic, because then if Fultz plays, you play Bogdanovic. If Fultz doesn't play, you switch your Bogdanovic lineups to Anthony Black at the exact same price with the exact same positional eligibility. So I like that quite a bit at the shooting guard small forward position. If you want to pay up, you got Franz Wagner. He would also get better with Fultz there, so I don't hate the idea of doing like a Wagner here, Bogdanovic here, and then if you can still add Bogdanovic to Anthony Black if Fultz happens to be out, where you're choosing between it's Bogdanovic or Wagner here. It's one of the two. And then power forward position, we got Giannis. Center, we got Okongwu. We're filling with the other guard spot with Payne. The last few guys you're looking at are the ones I've already mentioned. You can play Fultz if he's in the lineup. If he's not, you can play Suggs. You can play Anthony Black. I don't know why I keep forgetting his name. And then Jalen Smith, power forward and center eligibility. I think he is absolutely in play as well. He's been getting decent minutes. Might be more of a tournament play just because, like, you see 17 minutes, 11 minutes. The point per minute production has been great, that's a scary thing to latch onto with those low minutes. So if you want to fade because of the high ownership on FanDuel or on DraftKings, I think that's fine. He's much lower on FanDuel. I think he makes for an interesting tournament play there. But he is cash viable, I think, just because he's nice and cheap and he allows you to get other things.
Okay, very good. Kyle, I will kind of ask you the same question here. I feel like TJ did a great job covering that build. Do you have any differentiating thoughts or factors here as you look at DK compared to FanDuel?
I think a couple of other guys open up a little bit on DraftKings in terms of, like TJ mentioned, being cash viable, which sort of, obviously with the added flexibility of a lot of the positions and utility, you get guys who are probably going to be a little bit more popular on DraftKings than they were on FanDuel. But I do think for the most part, It's fairly similar to FanDuel. I think there's a couple names that differ. First one is going to be Bruce Brown. I think stands out as a tournament play here. We have him for about 31 minutes. Sub 5% projected ownership. I think that's a pretty good number there. He's the pivot off of a guy like Mathurin, if you're looking to pivot off of him there. And the price tag, I think, is also fine. I think the one issue that I have with Bruce Brown is, if you play him at point guard, or if you play him at small forward in that price range, you kind of lock yourself up for a player in that price range. And if Fultz is ultimately ruled out, you're hurting yourself there by potentially not being able to pivot to a guy like Cole Anthony or Jalen Suggs. So I would just keep that in mind. If you are playing Bruce Brown, I would do it with the intention of being able to still pivot off of whoever else you need to make that move to. So likely you're wanting Fultz in that lineup, so you have that added flexibility. I think Bogdanovich is a great call there. The cheaper price tag over on DraftKings. Forgot to mention him on FanDuel. I actually like him quite a bit on FanDuel. Again, just another guy that you can sort of have in your back pocket if you're looking to make some late swaps there, especially if Fultz is ruled out. So Bogdanovich, I think, is a really strong play on both sites, and I do think he's cash viable on DraftKings. So definitely wanted to mention him just because I did forget to mention him on the FanDuel side. But for the forwards, I think a lot of same names. Wagner, I think, is going to be in sort of this mid range here. Buddy Hield is fairly appealing. In terms of the price here, 6.6, it is up there a little bit, but again, really high total. 242 implied total here in this game. Buddy Hield's a guy who hasn't really been spectacular this year. We know that he's been losing minutes to some younger guys, but we still know that he can go out there and get hot. He's already had 4 games with 4 threes and 2 in the last 3 games with 5+ threes. So we know he's going to go out there and he's going to shoot. He's taken 12 3-pointers in 2 of his last 3 games. If he gets hot and he hits 5-6 threes, he can definitely find his way into being DraftKings viable, especially with that 3-point bonus. So I think Buddy Hield's kind of the guy that sticks out there if you are looking to potentially have one player that's unique and contrarian. He's a forward there that makes sense there. Same thing for Middleton on both sides. I like him there. And then already talked about Mo Wagner. He does have power forward and center eligibility over here. And again, with another guy sort of being introduced into the potential cash fold in Okongwu and Jalen Smith, both guys who could have some ownership, I think we're going to see guys like Wagner and Bobby Portis be pretty low owned on this slate. And then you can even pay up a little bit for guys like Capella and Lopez. I don't think there's going to be any ownership on these guys. I think a lot of people are going to be spending down for guys like Okongwu and Jalen Smith and even Goga Bitadze. So I think those 3 names, Wagner, Portis, Capella, and you can even throw Brook Lopez into that mix, are all pretty strong contrarian plays on DraftKings there. And you have even added incentive to play them just because you do have utility spots. You're not necessarily tying yourself up with one center there.
Okay, good stuff, guys. TJ,
I love those calls for tournaments as well. And so many people are going to be using the utility position for a point guard today because there are so many great point guards. I think this is one of the most interesting, different things you can do for tournaments right here. Brook Lopez, Clint Capella. Nobody's going to be they're going to be very low owned for a 2-game slate, and they aren't very expensive. As you can see, $4,700. You can play these guys, get different, and they're still nice salary saving options. So we can plug in again chalkier options here for the rest of our lineups. And as we can see, we obviously won't fill out the lineup, but as we can see, it still fits. 4,400 remaining for a last position. You can find somebody for that. So you can play chalky players if you just find the 1 or 2 ways to get different in single entry style tournaments on this slate.
I love it. Kyle, I've got a question here. As far as the spend ups, right? Everybody's on Giannis and Halliburton. Is there a next tier down that's getting 0 ownership that could pop off that you're interested in? Maybe it's Boncaro, or maybe it's somebody on the Hawks.
Trae Young and DeJounte Murray are kind of the guys in that range. I don't know if they're going to get 0 ownership. I'm sort of in a spot where I sort of feel like in single entry or smaller field contests, I think Halliburton might even be a little bit under owned. I don't think he'll be low owned by any means, but for where I think he should be, I think this is a guy who should probably be 50% owned on this slate. And I think, on DraftKings right now, we're looking at 36%. I think that's probably a bit too low. So I think people are just sort of, getting lost in the shuffle just because there's so many guys in this range between the guard position, Halliburton, Young, and Murray. So I think all of these guys are sort of going to eat away at each other. So I don't think anyone's necessarily going, overlooked or underowned by any means, but I do think Halliburton's going to be a guy who think is underowned based on where he should be. And then Trae Young is going to be a guy who I think just gets lost in the shuffle here on both sides, really. So he's a guy that I have a lot of interest in as well.
Very nice. Okay. I felt like maybe I was too chalky going Giannis Halliburton, but it's good to know that they're I can get different elsewhere. We'll just put it that way. I don't have to get different there.
Yeah, I agree with what Kyle said 100%. On FanDuel, that's not the case. On FanDuel, that's going to be the chalkier build. But on DraftKings, for whatever reason, Halliburton is going underowned in tournaments based on our projection right now.
Yeah. Okay, very nice. Guys, we've got only 3 minutes until lock, so we'll make sure we'll get a few QQs, and then I'll hit you with a few notes after that as well. Mike says, FanDuel single entry to both fellas. Preferred Magic stud, Paolo or Franz? TJ, you can go first. Paolo or Franz?
Paolo. He has just been absolutely crushing it lately.
Okay, Kyle?
Yeah, Franz for me. Or sorry, Paolo for me as well.
Okay. Swag with Chris, FanDuel single entry. TJ, Trey and Johnson or Fultz Boncaro?
Trey and Johnson.
D-Rock says, Kyle, DKGPP, if Fultz is out, would you prefer Suggs, Capella, or Cole Anthony and Goga?
Suggs, Capella slightly for me.
Okay, great. More questions coming from the YouTube chat. Hit us with a little thumbs up if you don't mind. GR Sauce says, TJ, is Giannis's efficient ownership too low? Maybe he means projected. I don't know. For this slate on DK in a large field GPP.
No, we haven't projected for 73% right now. I think it's going to be something like that. Maybe it gets up to 80-ish, but I think it's going to be pretty darn high.
Okay. What do you do in DK single entry? Oh, I actually asked that already. Giannis and Tyrese Halliburton. We did that. Is Jalen Smith viable? You guys said yes. DK GPP forward spot for you, Kyle. Bogdan or Mo Wagner?
Let me check. I think I prefer Bogdan slightly, but I just like the leverage that you have for Wagner. So I'm actually going to give the slight edge to Wagner there in tournaments.
Okay. FanDuel from Darren. TJ, you want Portis, Brown, or Bay in your last spot?
I would go Bay, I think, just to get a little bit. I mean, if that's a cash thing, then Brown, I guess. If that's a tournament, I would go Bay.
Okay. Hammer coming in with random Napoleon jokes. We always appreciate that. Jackson Carr says, all right, so this is kind of a thinking question. If you're fading Tyrese, should I play both Mathurin and Brown, or Buddy or Mathurin and one of the Hawks guys like Bay or Bogdanovich?
I would prefer Mathurin and Brown.
Okay. Very nice. Less than a minute until lock. FanDuel cash. TJ, Goga and Clam Chowder or Brolo and Patty C? Who's Pat? Oh, Pat Connaughton.
Neither, but the Goga one. You shouldn't be playing either of those second options in cash. Crowder and Patty Connaughton, both I don't think are cash viable.
Okay. We should note we got a football game coming up, and Kyle, I do believe you are on a football show coming up.
Yep.
What is that like right after this?
It'll be like 7:40, I believe. So just a half hour before lock.
Okay. So make sure you are checking that out. And speaking of football, as we are quickly approaching lock, if you have not checked out our Sims Lab beta, it is fantastic. Highly recommend it. NFL building at just like a whole nother level. For limited time, you can try it for free. It's a brand new product, generates DFS lineups through the power of the Sims. It's all the rage these days, combines data from every aspect of the slate, churning out lineups. You can make it very easily match your preferences. In just a few clicks, you can have hundreds of well-built correlated lineups ready to go for whatever contest type you're playing. Check out the link in our description for more information. It is absolute fire. It is the future, so make sure you are getting in on that. With that, we've hit the lock. Anything that you gentlemen want to see, or should we let TJ go for movie night here?
No, I think that's about it from me. Make sure you stay tuned for the football show after with Kyle and Chop. And good news for those who want to see a lot of me on shows this month. Bad news for those who don't. There are 2 days the rest of November where I'm not going to be on show for either football or basketball. So lots and lots of content coming. Get used to me.
A lot of TJ. That's how we like it. A lot of TJ on the way. All right, we're going to bounce on out of here. So for TJ, for Kyle, for our wonderful production crew, always working hard behind the scenes. Guys, we appreciate you. We love you. And we will catch you tomorrow. You have been crunched.